Hey there, Michael Stack here, CEO of AMAX. So one of the things we hear a lot about in workers' compensation is state law reforms. Now you may be wondering yourself, or you may have wondered to yourself, or at least at some point, wouldn't it be great if there was a law, if there was legislation that required the one thing that we know makes the most impact on workers' compensation claim outcomes, drives down workers' compensation costs, improves the outcome for the injured worker, and drastically reduces injury durations, which is return to work. Well, I'm here to tell you today, I'm here to open up your eyes, if you weren't aware of it, that there is a law, and it's called the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, and it was created by Congress in 1990, and what it is, it's a civil rights law, and it protects what is covered or technically termed a qualified individual with a disability from discrimination in the workplace. But what you might not be aware of is that most of your employees who are injured at work fall under the umbrella of a qualified individual with a disability and are covered by the ADA. I'm going to say that again. Most of your employees who are injured at work fall under the umbrella of a qualified individual with a disability, and they're covered by the ADA. Now, if you weren't aware of that to this point, you need to be aware of it. As an employer, it's something you need to be educated on. But the best practices, and the good news is that the best practices of workers' compensation, return to work best practices, and ADA compliance are very much parallel to each other. So if you're following one, you're likely following the other. What I want to do today is cover some of these very basics, some of these very basic ADA and return to work best practices terms, and have you now start to recognize how you can tie and marry these two together to create better compliance with the ADA and create better return to work outcomes. So let's talk about what these terms mean. You've got the interactive process, reasonable accommodation, and then light duty and how it applies. So under the ADA law, a qualified individual with a disability, you're required to engage in what is called the interactive process. Now that could sound like a very legal and sort of overwhelming and complicated term, but all it really means is you're having a conversation. You're having a conversation, interacting with that employee and talking about what it is that they have going on and how you could potentially accommodate their job to have them do the essential functions of that job. Now, essential functions, again, another sort of legal sounding term, but when you break it down, it's just really the things that are most important in that job. You're a forklift driver, can you drive the forklift or not? And can we accommodate your job in order for you to be able to do that? It's very basic level, that's all it means. So you're having this conversation in order for you to create together as an employee and as an employee this accommodation for them to do their essential functions of the job. Now let's talk about light duty and how it relates to this and how this workers' comp process relates to this. Now in the ADA and how this sort of differs, but how it sort of parallels each other, is that there's a requirement under the law that they could do the essential functions. There's no expectation, there is no law requiring them to do a lower amount of job or sort of a reduced output. Now, this is the biggest difference between return to work best practices and light duty, is that the ADA requires by law for them to do the essential functions of that job. In light duty, in return to work best practices, often that output is slightly reduced, or it can be slightly reduced. And you're giving and taking that improved injury duration, that improved cost, that improved outcome for that injured worker. You're able to give up some of those essential functions on certain occasions in a return to work process, but in the ADA you're not. But let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at these best practices, and let's take a look at how you're creating these jobs under federal law and now how this can all sort of start to tie together and make some sense. In the ADA law, you're required to have a conversation. Best practices in workers' compensation management require you or recommend that you have a conversation. But it all comes down to this idea of working together with your employees to get them back to work. It's required under federal law. It's workers' compensation best practices. So if you could put this perspective around this idea of following these best practices, following ADA law, you will be significantly better off in both your work comp program as well as your ADA compliance. Again, I'm Michael Stack, CEO of AMAX. Remember, your work today in workers' compensation can have a dramatic impact on your company's bottom line, but it will have a dramatic impact on someone's life. So be great.